I'm back, and so now let's talk about some definitions from chemistry. So the first one is, what is matter? Matter has mass and it takes up space. So for example, this pen, if I was to put it on a mass scale, you would notice that it has a certain mass to it, and you can see that it has a length and a width and a height, so it takes up space. So we would say that this thing is composed of matter. Now, what is matter composed of? Okay, that's where the word element comes in. So a element is going to be the smallest amount of matter that still has the chemical properties of that matter. So let's say, for example, that we're talking about oxygen. So that oxygen, the stuff that you breathe, is molecular oxygen, meaning that it's two oxygens that are glued together. And you know that oxygen has certain chemical properties. So for one thing, you can breathe it. Another thing, you can burn things in the presence of oxygen. Now, what would happen though if we were to separate this thing into its individual oxygens? So now we have atoms of oxygen. And then what would happen if we reached in and we pulled out one of those electrons? So an atom has electrons that are in orbit around the nucleus of every element. And so if we were to pull out one of those electrons, all of a sudden this oxygen would not have the same chemical properties that it used to have. So the smallest amount of matter that still has the chemical properties of that matter, we're going to say is an element. And there's 92 naturally occurring elements in the periodic table, for example. Then what is an atom? So it's going to be the smallest amount of an element. So for example, you could have a jar that is full of oxygen. But if you were to take the smallest piece of that oxygen out, then that would be an atom of oxygen. Okay, then a compound is going to be two or more different elements that are bonded together. So for example, water. So water is H2O. So that would be a chemical compound. It's got hydrogen and oxygen in it. But a molecule is going to be two or more atoms bonded together. So this could be a molecule of water, but this thing up here would also be a molecule of oxygen. So this would be two like elements that are glued together, and then these are two different elements that are glued together. So the point is that as these video lessons go on and the semester goes on, if you're one of my students, we're going to be talking about elements and atoms and compounds and things like that. So I just want you to have these definitions in the back of your head. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the structure of the universe.